Stephane, thanks so much for joining us on Wall Street Unplugged.
Thank you, Frank. So happy to be here.
Well, truly an honor because you're a pioneer in the security token industry. And let's start there. Through your firm, Elevator Returns, you launched a major commercial real estate transaction under blockchain technology, and that was the Aspen St. Regis token. And what made you go that route? Because when you're looking at that luxury hotel, I believe it's like 180 room, beautiful hotel. I think you could have went the IPO route or different routes. What made you do it through the security token route?
All right, wonderful question. In fact, we tried the IPO round and we failed. We failed for two reasons. I think that the days of the legacy stock markets are counted. People want for something different. So if you look at the big companies on the New York Stock Exchange, you really have it has changed recently, but mainly you have big companies and the trading is dominated by institutional trader or high frequency trader. So if you're a small, tiny company, this is not the most viable way to raise capital. Secondly, I really do believe that everywhere you look today, whether it's on the currency front, on the political front, people are looking for disruption. I think people had enough with the old institution. They feel somewhat cheated, or they feel that these institutions are no longer giving them what they need. They want to be able to make their own decision. And truly, this is what the blockchain and crypto movement is doing. So we are looking at the future. We don't look at the past. We believe that access to great investment should be democratized. And we think that tapping into the blockchain community was the right way to do.
Yeah, you said a couple of interesting things there, because I saw you quote one of your quotes where you say, secure tokenization, security tokens allow for the democratization of the investment process. Could you go into that a little bit more? Because in terms of not having a middleman, because I think some people, we know the utility token space, right? Where, a lot of these kids have raised money. It's a utility token. You don't get an equity stake. It's totally different from security tokens. But I don't want this to be an industry, because I get a lot of calls. I'm sure you get a lot of calls now that we launch a CEO token of people trying to raise money very easily. But this isn't something like that. You're talking about the democratization of the whole process, right? That's why people should be launching security tokens.
That's right. If you look at owning trophy property today, right? If you're going to buy a hotel, most likely you're going to have to buy the entire hotel. So if you say trophy hotel trade in the 250 to 500 million range, that really narrowed down the universe of people that can actually enjoy ownership of a trophy property. And also then you have really normally the binary nature of holding real estate, which means you either own it or you don't. There's never been a process where you can say, I can buy a little bit of it, I can add to my position, or I can sell some of it if I need some urgent liquidity. I think that what security token do is, by creating a market for those private investment, if you want, you give basically a whole new universe of opportunity to Joe on the street. And I think that this is what the future is going to be. If you come and ski in Aspen year after year, and now you know that you can actually own a piece of the hotel where you stay, you can get a cashback rebate as an owner. You have all the other perks that we've created in our owner benefit program. You're like, this is pretty cool. And guess what? Because you're also tied up to real estate, you hedge against inflation, and you're probably looking very good 10, 20 years from now, when you're going to pass on your token to your daughter and sons. So I think this is what we call by democratization, is go and pick what you want, get exposure to it, as simple as 3 clicks away.
Now, talk a little bit more about those perks, because I think people don't realize that. First of all, your token trades on T0, one of the largest, if not the largest, security token digital platform, I should say, not exchange. It does have liquidity. I know you're happy with that decision, and it's available to mom and pop investors, right? So what if someone goes to T0 or they go to Dinosaur Financial, whatever they have to do to get their account set up? Can anyone buy your token, and what are some of the benefits they get? Because we're not just talking about equity, potential dividend. There's more benefits, right?
That's right. So it's as simple as I say, is 3 clicks away. You open an account, you fund your account, and then you purchase. Anyone can do it. There's no restriction, and there's no minimum amount. Secondly, you are completely correct, Frank. We wanted to take the concept of ownership beyond just being an equity holder and receiving financial dividend. We want to create the perception and the recognition of being a true owner. So we've established different level of ownership based on how many tokens you own. And when you come on property, we have like super cool partnership with the coolest brand. And you receive a VIP amenity. You receive a sports car for a test drive. You receive a cash back on your stay from 20% up to 50%. And we really mean it when we say we treat token holders as owners. So you feel like you're an owner. And I tell you, it's super cool.
It is super cool when you think about it. Now, you are known as a pioneer. You started the Chefs Club, which is amazing. I read a lot about that, rotating cast of nearly 200 chefs for around the world, which is really cool. When you look at security tokens, how does this compare to some of the other things that you were pioneering in terms of maybe the upside potential, where you think this could actually go?
Let's put it this way. I mean, Chef Club is a great concept and we're super proud. We are probably too early, but I think in a post-COVID world, everyone's going to go the Chef Club way, because I don't think there's a single chef around that wants to invest in a 15-year investment when you realize it can be taken away from you overnight. But coming back to security token, there's a couple of things that I would like to say here. First, this is just changing a technology that power existing investment. So we are not inventing anything. We're just applying technology to make it easier for people to access. Once you understand that, it is not an if, it's a when and how. So I've never been as convinced in any of my projects from an entrepreneurial point of view that 5 years from now, most investment will be digitized. And 5 years from now, everyone's going to have a wallet, a digital wallet on their phone, and they're going to have access to their own wealth instruments at their fingertip.
Well, I want to make it clear too, because you're not someone where we see on CNBC or Fox where they're talking about a certain trend is going to be. I mean, you're fully engulfed in this, not just the Aspen token, and I'm engulfed in it, not just our CEO Curzio Equity Owners token. But I read that you have around $1 billion in real estate, and if I read it correctly, you plan to digitalize that entire portfolio.
Yeah, I mean, we're very fortunate because as a group we have great partners and partnership and alliance. And if you add all the universe of ownership today, it's actually way beyond 1 billion. And guess what? These people joined us in the ecosystem because they are fully convinced that that's the answer to their own challenge in their own industry. So I can tell you, whether you look in Asia or you look at here, the people that are really holding the bag, if you want, they're already making move into digitization of their investment product. And you've seen that even in the banking world. I mean, JP Morgan was very famous to say Bitcoin is a scam. And guess what? You had the JP Morgan coin, and I've read some research saying it's probably going to go to 140,000. It's always the same name of the game is if you see a trend, you're going to let crazy Wild West type of people making the first move. But if and when you understand that there is no doubt that this is going the direction, you're going to see the big player joining basically the trend. And this is, I think, what's happening right now.
Well, you mentioned Bitcoin, and we've seen it at an all-time high now. Do you think this is, for me, I personally think it's good news, but when do you see our industry? One, I guess I would ask you, you think this is a good thing for security tokens? And two, when do you see this industry getting adopted like Bitcoin is, where you could buy it on PayPal, Square now, Coinbase? It's very easy. 3 years ago, people were like, what is this? I'm not too sure. Now you see it everywhere, and it's very easy for people to buy. It's not hard. Your computer, like you said, you held up your phone. Where do you see this, or what time frame where people really understand our industry like that?
Well, there's going to be a couple of, that's a fantastic question, by the way, because it's really key. The question is how fast will the adoption be, and what are the triggers that we're looking for to see the first key portion of adoption. So one is going to be size, the size of the deal coming out there and the type of players. You need to understand that for a market to be liquid, you need to have a certain amount of supply and demand. So the size of the deal, of the good deal hitting the market, is going to be a key component. Secondly is regulation. You know, we are still stuck in the 1933 Securities Act. And guess what? Most countries in Asia, and we are developing a lot in Asia, have understood that in a digital world, you need to change the rules. I personally believe that the SEC in the US are completely aware of that, but they are just very careful at putting a line in the sand, because once you accept one precedent, you're going to have to make sure that everybody use the new rule in a good way. So I think regulation is going to move towards acceptance of digital investment product. So you have size, you have quality of deal, you have regulation. But as you mentioned, at the end of the day, it's the demand of the people. If people are going to start saying, I want this, can you do this? At the end of the day, the market will adopt the demand. So my prediction is you're going to see the market probably moving faster in another portion of the world, most likely Asia. And this is why we have huge investment in Asia, and we're going to launch many, many tokens there. But then regulator in the US is going to look and say, oh my God, what's happening in Singapore, Thailand? What shall we learn from it? And then you're going to have a back integration of regulation in the US. That's my prediction.
How important is it, because we have a new SEC chair coming in, that they are familiar with this industry? Because, I mean, maybe I could ask you this, what have you learned, or what has happened over the past 12 months that you didn't know maybe 24 to 36 months ago? And I think a lot of that might be on the compliance side, but I think that's kind of important, right? With the new SEC chairman coming in and really getting the rules in place, because everything seems so vague in the US. And you talked about, Asia and Southeast Asia, but I guess, what have you seen over the past 12 months or even 6 months that has you that confident that, hey, you know what, we're going to get over this speed bump. There's going to be more transparency. And that, of course, is going to make it easier because people are going to be safer investing in this industry.
Well, I think that the key difference, and we have to go back to Bitcoin, whether you like it or you don't. I'm not a big fan. I believe in the gold standards. I believe that any form of instrument should have some form of economically viable collateral to it. If it's just based on perception, it's great, but I think it has its own limit. But I love what's happening in Bitcoin right now, because it's an institutional drive of new flow into Bitcoin. And I think that once you have like the cyberpunk and the hackers moving something, then it's easy to make the argument and say, listen, that's a scam. But once you have Guggenheim partner, once you have the big names in institutional investing that start allocating portion of their wealth into Bitcoin, then as the SEC, it's very difficult to go back and say that's a Ponzi scheme, because again, it's market driven. So I would say the institutionalization of the trend into blockchain-based product is what has fundamentally changed. And I think it's good. And, I saw last week that there was some gossips about whether or not there's going to be higher scrutiny on self-custody wallets. And some people cry, oh, that's the end of it. I think this is great, because guess what? If the only reason this industry exists is because we're going to bypass anti-money laundering regulation, then we should not exist. Exactly. I think we should embrace transparency. I think that the key revolution is not that you try to avoid tax. The key revolution is that you are owner of your own wealth, and you can make your own decision, and you don't need to feed the intermediation chain that exists today in the financial world.
You made an interesting point before too about, tokenization of real estate. You're highly connected in the real estate industry. We just talked about that. How big is the real estate industry on a whole that you think, because you said you eventually you think all of these assets will become digitalized. I mean, that's a bold statement considering how big the real estate industry is.
Well, I mean, Frank, here is our thought, right? What the Bitcoin rally does teach us is people are looking for alternative to fiat money,
Mhm.
right? So you say if you're gonna print it, if it's worth as much as toilet paper, why do I own it, right? So people are looking for alternative, and today Bitcoin is the most liquid alternative. But what if tomorrow you're gonna have a Bitcoin which is collateralized by a pool of global real estate? Then what do you have? You have an underlying economically generating income pool of assets
Mhm.
that back up something which is also has the quality of Bitcoin, which is scarcity, which is easy transferable, and which is global, and not at the fingertips of the current corrupted central banks. So I think that you have all the positive of Bitcoin, but you also have something that gives you a safety net on the downside.
Mhm.
So the size, if you look at all commercial real estate and agricultural land, you're looking at 70 trillion. And guess what? The government will love it. Do you know why? Because it will help reflating the balance sheet of government-owned institution and banks. So if you actually create, if you look at real estate, not I own real estate because I need a home and a roof above my head, but real estate is an income, and real estate serves as collateral for a monetary instrument. Then guess what? Maybe valuation of real estate should be think in a different light, and maybe you have plenty of upside in real estate. And that's going to reflect balance sheet, and this is what the world needs. Total debt is too big. Central bank are trying to reflate, they're just using the wrong tool.
Mhm.
They're basically debasing the money. And what the market is saying right now, they're saying, we don't want that.
Mhm.
We want alternatives. So I think that we're only scratching the tip of an iceberg. I think central bank will basically disappear, or their role will be vastly changed in the very near future, and we're going to see alternative privately owned currencies.
70 trillion, that's a big number. And that's just real estate. I mean, ours, we have a corporation that there's, any asset could be tokenized. But let's stay on real estate just for one more second, because yeah, I think you're a pretty highly connected guy in the real estate industry. So what are you hearing? Because I can see even in your excitement as we're doing this interview, watching on video, where do you see or what are you hearing out there from people? Because I know you're probably associated with so many other people. Now that you launched your Aspen token, is your phone ringing off the hook? Are people asking more questions? Are you seeing that from people who weren't really familiar in the industry, especially in your line of work in real estate?
That's right. I think everybody try to understand what the potential and the possibilities are. They
Hmm.
also try to understand the challenges, and the challenges are twofold today. One is how do you make the market liquid? And I think with people like you helping preaching basically the potential, and people can really understand what it is, then then I think it's going to help. And people are also trying to understand how do we tweak the current instrument to make it more palatable. So you have a drive from regulatory and using lawyers to lobby basically the authorities, and then you have a discovery. But as I mentioned to you, what's going to happen, it's every day you convince another person and another person, and people looked at it, and it's not going to be, I don't think it's a flash in the pan. I think it's a long-term trend, and it's all about being a pioneering. You need to go on a mission, you need to go on a crusade, and every day you convert somebody new. But I can tell you a couple of things. Most of the real guys in this industry, they're all looking at it.
Hmm.
Certainly, most of them are talking to me, and they try to understand. And soon, my prediction is you're going to see a very, very big name doing a major tokenization of a big pool portfolio.
No, that's great news. And maybe talk a little bit more about the institutions, because even when you look at Uber, I always look at Uber as I looked in this industry, where if you take an Uber, it just makes sense. I mean, from every single level, it makes sense. You'd probably never take a taxi again. It's cheaper, it's safer. You can call a person, everything. It just checks off every box. Everything that bothers you about taking a taxi, it's checked off every box. This is the same thing here, but what we saw with Uber, taxis didn't want to adopt it. We saw cities didn't want to adopt it. Now this disruption is occurring in an industry that's a boys club, right? We're looking at these big institutions, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley's. This is, dancing on their turf, basically. Do you think that's going to prevent this from scaling, or is it going to get to a point where they're very smart, those guys over there, even though some people don't like them? They're going to say, all right, this is inevitable. We need to get in it now.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen if you look at, I'm going to drop a couple of names here. If you look at what's happening in the leverage, basically crypto market, you have great institution companies like BlockFi that give you leverage against your crypto assets. You look at who are subscribing to their private round of capitalization. These are people like Morgan Creek, Sequoia, largest banks in Asia. So the big boys, like you say, the Goldman Sachs, the JP Morgan, they have their own VC arm that are already seeding those companies. I don't think they want to do the transformation from within, because you're going to have hundreds of bankers that's going to say, hey, you're killing effectively my job. I've been selling REIT for the last 20 years. And if this goes off, but what they do, they go on the sideline, they seed those companies. And then the size will be to the point that it becomes cool to raise your hand and say, I'm actually backing this trend. So we are probably in this foundation infrastructure building where 5 years ago, it was totally uncool. If you associated an institution and name with the name crypto or blockchain in the same sentence, you are basically branded as a drug addict. Today, it's kind of, what if you're right? 5 years from now, it's like, if you don't do it, you're basically a dinosaur and people won't even look at you.
Yeah. And I guess the last question here, because you mentioned earlier how you have real estate all over the world, especially Southeast Asia and Europe. Is it easier on the regulatory front to establish security tokens there? Of course, the U.S. is a market you want to be at. It's huge. It could be incredibly liquid if, we just ease up on the regulation a little bit and do the right thing here. But are you seeing this trend globally right now and we're slow in the U.S., or is it kind of like everyone's kind of starting to adopt this at a slow pace and you think it's going to get bigger around the world?
Well, I mean, it's like everything, right? If you look at internet banking in a country like Thailand, you have 84% penetration of internet banking. If you're looking at internet banking in the US, I think you're in the mid-30s. So what you're doing is, when you look at growing countries, growing economies, they embrace innovation because they see this as an opportunity to jump the ladder. Countries that have their marketplace firmly established, they're under the threat of the big lobbies that say, don't change the rule because that's going to create competition. So I think what you're going to see growing economies, emerging market moving probably 10 times the speed that the mature market's going to move on. And then you're going to see the in-betweeners, people like Switzerland, countries like Switzerland, Netherlands, Germany, that are mature economies, but always looking for innovation. So I would say probably if we had to rank the speed of adoption, Asia is going to be first, Europe second, and unless I'm missing something, the US will trail behind for the next 2 to 3 years.
No, that's great. And you're in Denver, Colorado. St. Regis is there. I guess, hopefully you're going to be going skiing pretty soon if you haven't gone this week or next week. But what are you seeing in terms of trends for the hotel? Because we know the hotel industry has not been that good. But from what I see, even in casinos, if you look at a travel, the bookings are huge going forward. Everyone's dying to get out of their houses. I was just curious to see in your neck of the woods, are people, we have the lockdowns now, we have great news coming out with the vaccine, but it seems like this thing's going to open up tremendously. I would think it's very good for that asset that you have at St. Regis.
Well, I mean, what we've learned is, I think that I don't have a crystal ball, and I'm not claiming to be a scientist, but I can look at data. Is living in the big cities is probably less and less appealing than moving to places where you actually enjoy your quality of life. And certainly the people that have to stay in the cities, as soon as you let them take a few days, they coming to places like Aspen. We see plenty of actually people even driving from California, from Texas, because they want to be here. It's beautiful, it's open air, people are compliant, and you have very, very low incidence of COVID cases. I don't know if it has to do with the altitude, but it's beautiful. So I think that resort hospitality is doing extremely well. Unfortunately, big conference hotel in big cities, I think there's going to be more pain.
That's great. Well, Stephane, we'll leave it there. I just want to say thank you so much for doing this interview. I know how busy you are. It's a big deal to my subscribers because, as you know, we have a Curzio Equity Owners Token. We only like to get people on here who really truly believe in this industry, who have stake in the game. And, I really appreciate you coming on, explaining everything to our audience.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you for having me, and happy holidays already.
Happy holidays. Great. Talk to you soon.
Bye now.